This is some snorkeling video that was taken off the island of Key Largo in the Florida Keys, a few miles offshore from the John Pennekamp State Park. I took my trusty GoPro and went for a snorkeling adventure. Discovered there's many different kinds of fish and plant life living in the reef. It's an area that we don't have in Michigan and the surrounding area that I'm used to. It was a very relaxing and enjoying adventure, except for the school of small jellyfish and the barracudas that kept eyeballing me. The average size of the barracudas in this area are generally from 3 to 4 feet long. It does make you feel a little bit odd. They're very curious fish and will follow you around and just kind of keep an eye on you and watch you. And it did make me a little bit nervous a couple times. In the shallowest spots along the reef, the water was probably only a couple of feet deep, and so you don't really need a scuba diving outfit or anything like that. A snorkel works just fine. Some of the areas on the outer part of it are close enough that you can dive down to them without any difficulty at all. I found it very interesting that when they're giving the marine forecast, they will give you the wave heights for outside the reef and inside, because they're different. Because the water gets so shallow there, when there's larger waves, they actually break offshore at the reef, and the waters in between there and the keys stay relatively calm. Here there seemed to be a whole school of barracudas that were kind of keeping an eye on me, watching me swim around and probably wondering what I was doing. And I started to wonder how many there was going to be if I continued to swim. I also saw some large amounts of small jellyfish swimming in the area, and they would swim up and be relatively close to me. And a couple spots I tried to get them to come out on video, but they didn't come out very well. A couple of the spots you can see them a little bit, and there were a few occasions where I used the camera to push them away to clear a path to swim through. I did manage to get stung by a jellyfish up by my right shoulder, and it wasn't that bad of an experience. I would relate it to being a little bit like a burn with a bee sting combined together. Not the most pleasant thing I've ever experienced, but definitely not horrible either. When you're swimming, you need to be careful not to hit the reef. It's very sharp and can cut you, and you can also damage the reef itself, and they always advise you not to touch it at all. Some of the red coral that grows there, they refer to as fire coral, and that will give you a bad reaction on your skin if you come in contact with it. We were advised that there was a nurse shark somewhere in the area. I never saw the shark, and I'm completely okay with that. In fact, I'd rather not see it. There are a lot of other things to see instead. I discovered after the fact that due to the lower light conditions under the water, with the GoPro, some of the colors did fade a little bit and were not quite as vibrant as they were in real life. But you can kind of get the idea that many of the things there have some bright colors to them. Some of the fish are very brightly colored. Not used to seeing that, but it made it enjoyable. There are several different options for snorkeling trips with different lengths. They had a 2.5 hour and a 4.5 hour. I went on the 2.5 hour trip. About an hour and a half of that, or a little more of that, was actual time in the water exploring the reef. The rest of the time was spent riding back and forth in the boat to get to the reef from the shore. There's many miles of reef offshore from the islands, and so the reef that you see depends in large part on where you left from. There are several places on the island that do snorkeling and scuba diving. The water was very clear. In fact, they had posted that the sight depth was about 40 feet. The water temperature was a balmy 75 degrees that day. This was probably the only time that I remember ever going swimming in the beginning of February. You won't do that in Michigan unless it's in a swimming pool. This was the first time I'd used the GoPro in the water. I was glad to see that the case was still watertight after years of having it on top of my dirt bike helmet and road bike helmet and dragging it around the woods. The wild thrashing you see me doing here with the camera is me whacking the little jellyfish to try to get them out of the way. Here's some video that I slowed down a little bit to try to let you see what the little jellyfish looked like. They still don't show up very well on the camera because they're so thin, but you can kind of see the little blurry spots there. And those are actually small jellyfish that are probably about 2.25 inches long or so. The boat captain did give some good advice. He said you'd be tempted to look down all the time, but every once in a while you want to stick your head out of the water and see where the boat is. I found that to be true while I was out there. There were a couple of times where I had wandered off a fair distance from the boat, and I didn't want to be too far away when they blew the whistle to return. There are spots where they have intentionally sunken ships in an attempt to make an artificial reef. Most of those are in a little bit deeper water, and if you like scuba diving, I'm sure it would be a very interesting adventure. In addition to all the fish that I saw and all the different coral formations and such, some of the others that were with our group also saw a sea turtle and also a big stingray. I would have liked to have seen both of those, but I did miss them somehow. Hopefully you've enjoyed sharing a little bit of my adventure with me, and maybe it'll inspire you to have a little adventure of your own. If you ever get the opportunity to scuba dive or snorkel along a reef, I would definitely recommend doing it. It is definitely worthwhile.